So the question that's front of mind for me is what is it upstream that made us devalue the role of a father? Where did that come from? Because fathers are somewhat seen as surplus to requirement, I think. Where did that come from?
It's cultural. It's entirely cultural, because there are cultures in the world who don't think that. Our fathers are very, very integral. So in fact, one of the most hands-on fathers in the world is from the Aka tribe in the Congo. They keep physical contact with their children for 50% of the day. They carry them around. They co-sleep, not the mum, they co-sleep with the child. They are the one that carries the child through the jungle when they're hunting and gathering. They are the one that sings to the child, reads stories to the child. They even, and this is the bit that always gets the headlines, they even will offer a nipple to soothe the child until the mother is ready to breastfeed. So it's cultural. We have this idea that, and it partly came very much from the Victorian period, where fathers were seen to be disciplinarians and providing the money. And that was the Victorian idea of being a father. It's also to do with our politics and society for a long time. So women weren't able to go out to work, and that's where we've remained till very, very recently. But there's no biology behind that. That's entirely cultural. And I think also it's very much the case. Yes, women today, we have contraception, so we can control our production of children. We can earn our own money. We can protect ourselves. We can look after ourselves. So actually, in one sense, you think, well, yeah, what's the dad for? Because I can do all those things which historically the father had to do when women's positions were different. And we've sort of carried on with that, and there's become this mantra of actually then we just don't need them. I mean, I've even been to lectures where they've decided that the Y chromosome is going to become obsolete, and that we really won't need dads at all, even to conceive children at some point, and which to me sounds ludicrous. And that's where it's come from. I mean, we've embedded that, and we embedded it in our media. So dads were always bumbling or useless or absent. You know, Daddy Pig is the ultimate bumbling, useless father, and we laughed at it. We think it's funny.
Maybe the way that these two subjects initially do sort of dovetail into each other is when we think about the state of love and the role of men and women. You touched a bit on it there when you talked about how women are earning more and more, so men are becoming a little bit more apparently obsolete in what they can offer to a monogamous relationship. There were some stats that I was looking at before you arrived, and I'll read them out to you. The stats say that only 38% of single women are actively looking to date versus 61% of single men, which is a huge gap. Morgan Stanley projects that 45% of women aged 25 to 44 will be single by 2030. In England and Wales, a record almost 40% of adults have never married. For women aged 30 to 34, the figure is now almost 60%. Which is the lowest ever. Women initiate roughly 70% of divorces, showing a greater willingness to exit marriages that are unsatisfying than men. And obviously, I think one of the points you were sort of touching on there is that women are now much more educated as it relates to things like college degrees compared to men. There's this bigger picture around relationships and love that kind of sits in the background of this, and women's rise and independence, which I think we can all agree is always going to be a positive thing. But downstream from that is a clear issue in how we form monogamous heterosexual relationships these days. And also, like, you know, part of the reason, one of many reasons I wanted to speak to you is I was thinking about my friendship group and the women that I know. And more, I spoke to a friend of mine a couple of weeks ago, and I said to her, like, what are your goals? And she said, oh, I currently have about 150 plants, and I want to get to about 250 plants. I said to her, do you want to get married? Do you want to have kids? She went, no interest in that.
Yeah.
What I want is I want to get to the point where I have financial freedom so I can buy a house, and I want to get over 200 plants.
Yeah.
And it sounds kind of funny, but it's an increasingly familiar story that I'm hearing, which is once upon a time, the goal would have been get married, you know, have kids, build a life together. Now it's more individualistic.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts here? What is the state of love at the moment?
Well, it's definitely more individualistic. We've become a more individualistic society. So we are looking more at, yes, what do I want rather than what in a way contributes to community, which is what collectivist societies do. Women in the past had to get married. You couldn't have children out of wedlock. That was definitely not acceptable. You had to get married because that's where your financial security was. And that's what you did. Quite often, those marriages weren't based on love. They were based on very pragmatic decisions about this is where I need to be. So women have been freed from that. They don't have to do that anymore. The other thing to say is they've realised that romantic love isn't the only love in the box. What we call their key survival critical relationship in many cases, so the relationship that's going to support them emotionally, physically, practically, all those sorts of things, are their female friends. Their chosen families. And that's who they're turning to. And that's why we're seeing less and less women saying that romantic love is a priority or parental love is a priority. And in one sense, that's great, because actually it's showing that all these loves are equal. And I can love in that way. And I think that's wonderful in one sense. But yes, it does mean that we're turning away from that idea of long-term cohabiting companionship. And so when people say to me, for example, is marriage going to die? Are we going to end? No, I don't think it is. We will always, for example, have a ritualistic marking of a romantic relationship, whatever sex you are and whatever sexuality you are. I think that will always exist. But we're going through a bit of a sea change. We're also seeing it in older women, postmenopausal women, because it's only really very recently that we've got to a point where we have a long postmenopausal lifespan as women. Usually, 100 years ago, if you got to 50, which is the age for menopause, the standard age, you were lucky if you were still alive. But now that period of time could be 20, 30, 40, even 50 years. So I think women post-50, and there's been a massive uptick in post-50 divorces instigated by women, is they look at their partner and they think, you were a great dad. I selected you when that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to have children, I wanted to build a family. But I look at you now and I think, but is this the person I want to do the next phase of my life with? Because that's a very different set of needs. And so we're seeing women actually looking, going, no, do you know what? I'm going to start afresh. I'm going to do something different. And it might be they look for a different relationship, or they might be, they decide, I'm not going to have another romantic relationship.